Recording in progress. Here we are. I am here with Jen, a fellow social worker. I can't even talk today. I think we've been talking too much because we've been catching up, tripping on words. But Jen and I have known each other. Oh God. I was actually just
Well,
thinking about this before, but maybe like 2016,
probably.
somewhere in
I
there.
think,
That's when I
yeah.
that's when I took over um the program in the ED, and I kind of met other social workers around the house. I wasn't overnights anymore. I became, I became a day walker and met people that actually work.
I knew your name for a lot longer than I knew your face.
Yes, yes, you could see my name in charts, and then you're like, oh, that's her. So I think we've known each other, gosh, since around then-ish. Um, and we've worked together in kind of different capacities and crossed paths. And I reached out to Jen recently to say, come on over to the podcast and let's chat and share your story, which you have, like, we could probably talk for hours, but yeah, so I'm super grateful that you decided to pop on today, especially during Social Work Month, so we can promote you and all the goodness and transitions that you have had over the last few years. So I'm going to pitch it over to you to explain who you are, what you do, and all the things.
Thank you so much for having me. Like Erin said, we've been chatting for 45 minutes now before we even started. So
I better
we
press
are
forward.
we're excited and we're like amped up and we have high energy right now. So I'm excited. Thank you for having me. So I'm Jen. I am a social worker by heart. That's where my heart will always be, is in social work. I am still doing some mental health therapy. I'm doing some work in the field with mental health crises, all of that fun stuff that social workers get to do that everyone else is like, oh my gosh, how do you do that? Um, and then I also, about 3 years ago, decided that I wanted to start something different and new. And I explored and branched off into the coaching world. And so today I am a life coach and I work a lot with women and helping professionals, similar to what Erin does. And yeah, I work with a lot of women, especially with anxiety, overwhelm, and burnout, and we work to get to a place of just like that chaos state and feeling overwhelmed in life and your career. And we work to just bring back some joy and happiness and calm. One word that I use a lot in my life and in my career is peace, and just the ability to find peace in the work that you do, in the life that you live. And I help women to move in that direction, and it's been amazing. So that's kind of where I am today. It's a long story of how I got here, but happy to share more. But yeah, I was someone who experienced burnout in my own profession and in my own career, and I knew that I had to take a step back and really kind of reevaluate what's important to me and why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. And that, that my own self-reflection and personal development kind of led me to where I am today. And it kind of saved me. I was in this place of just not feeling good about who I was and what I was doing, and through just some work that I did on myself, I found that, hey, I can create a better life and I can create more of what I need and want, and I have the control over that. So why am I not doing it? And I kind of took the reins and did it, and here I am.
Amazing. Amazing. Oh my goodness. There's so much I want to ask and so much I want to dive into. But I think the first thing that comes to mind for you, Jen, is like, can you, or what comes to mind first for you when I ask this question of like, what was the turning point? What was that moment of like, no more? And I think, I have interviewed a lot of social workers, especially this month because it's Social Work Month, and having a lot of folks on the podcast, and all their answers are a little different, but You and I are very similar in the work that we've done. We've done, ED work, ICU work, hospital work, clinic work, outpatient work, community work, crisis work, right? Like we've done so much and we've been in so many parallels, both in a medical capacity, in a psychiatric capacity, community, all of that. And I think it's great because we get a little bored, so we need to like we're like, "Oh,
Mhm.
I figured this out. Check. Let me try this over here." And I think there's so many of us like that, right? There's so many of us that are
Yeah.
like we feel almost burned out because we've mastered a certain
Mhm.
skill, right? And I think sometimes we feel like that plateau, it feels icky. It feels like I need
Yeah.
something different, right? And
Yeah.
knowing the difference between that, where you're just feeling plateaued versus like true full on depressed burnout. I'm not serving me, I'm not serving others. And so that's a place where I think we both have been, which we were
Yeah.
talking about right before this. And like when you recognize it and you say, line in the sand, no more, right? Like what was that moment for you or moments or like
Yeah.
you pinpoint that for yourself?
Yeah. So it's interesting because, I think a lot of stories start this way. During COVID,
Oh yeah.
which is how my story is going to start, is during COVID. I found myself kind of plateauing, like just going through the motions of my day. Like I'm going to make a checklist and I'm going to do all of this and I'm not putting a whole lot of thought or energy into a lot that I was doing. So I I knew the signs were there that like something wasn't right, but I wasn't paying attention to them. What got me to pay attention to them was during COVID, my husband actually had a significant medical issue happen that took me out of work. Um, and it was a turning point for me. So hopefully nobody has a turning point this significant for themselves. My goal is to help you to recognize those signs and symptoms so that you can address them before it gets to a traumatic point. But my husband actually went into the hospital and he was hospitalized for quite some time. And during that time, my only focus was him and our family. And during that time, the focus became about like, oh, disability paperwork and, doing sign off and, making sure my shifts were covered. And I was like, I don't have the capacity to be able to take all of this on and worry about any of this small stuff. And that's when it kind of started to really shift my thinking into what's important to me and how do I make that more of a priority in my own life. And it was a time where I had a lot of time to reflect on life and family and relationships. And so for me, like something terrible unfortunately had to happen for me to make that shift. Um but it really opened my eyes to, wow, I don't wanna have to worry about all of this little stuff. I wanna have control over my own life. I wanna be able to give 100% to the things that are most important to me, and I felt that, where I was at in my career, it was taking away from that, and so that's kind of where the shift happened. And funny story is that when my husband came out of the hospital, he's doing well today, but when he came out of the hospital, I said, "I think I wanna be a life coach," and he was like, "Okay, cool. Where did that come from?"
You're like,
But it
you
was
you almost dying and being in the hospital. That's where
yeah,
the
I know. But while you were there, I thought about it, and
Oh, we can
but
laugh
that was
now,
just
right?
we can laugh now, but it was just a huge shift in really understanding and identifying, like, what was most important in my life and how do I make that a priority.
Yeah, it's so huge. It's such a good point. Yeah, I mean, as you were saying that, I was thinking about sort of my transition, right? Like it just like
Mhm,
what kind of came for me. Same, like it was during COVID and it was,
mhm.
I mean, not that I did not have anything significant, but I was in the emergency department and I wasn't taking care of myself and my relationship was on the rocks and like just so much, right? Like in my life felt like it was falling apart. It was like this manifest chaos, right? Like and
Yeah.
until I realized like I was the tornado just like spinning in this
Mhm.
chaos, it was like, okay, wait, if I created the tornado, I can also stop it, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah, it was like those things. It's so interesting too, sometimes I love that you were like, "I want to help people figure out when they're in it before it gets to a point where something penetrates them to, like, show them that they're in it," right? Because I think that's such a huge point if we can be that for each other, right? We're sort of in this grind in our
yes,
society of, like, everybody's on their own trying to figure it out, which is so true, but it's like we were meant
right.
to be, like, tribal. We were meant to be there for each other, you know?
Right. Exactly, exactly, and I think that, you know, it's so funny because I posted something on, my LinkedIn page a couple of months back, and it was about not giving 100% to your job, because when you give 100% to your job, you're taking away from something else. And I was always in the mindset that I'm giving everything all the time, and I was having nothing left to give at the end of the night. And do you know how many people argued on my post about that post? And I was like, "Oh, no, no, you guys are doing this all wrong. Like, you need to kind of shift that balance a little, because you're going to burn out, and you're going to get to that point where something something is going to, like, go off for you that says, "I can't do this anymore." And it's just so interesting, the different mindsets that go into, like, how much you're putting out versus how much you're taking back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's such a huge part of my business too, and something that I learned along the way in these last handful of years of transitioning of, like, value added, value received, right? That energetic component of, like, when you're at a job in or any time in your career where you feel like you are adding more value than you're receiving, we need to evaluate that shift or vice versa. Like, are you not putting
Oh,
enough in and you're getting right?
right.
That means you're bored. That means that you're
Yeah,
like, or the reverse is burnout, right? So
right,
it's sort of
right.
recognizing where am I in that exchange of energy. That's such a huge
Yeah,
piece. I love that though. That's interesting. Isn't
yeah.
it funny that people like there are some really powerful posts that I put out that are like, we were talking about me being a little bit of a wild child, right? Like a wild card. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a controversial post. Post, send, right? Like completely a little bit out there. But then you get these people that are like, oh yeah, you're crazy. Nope, that's wrong. And it's like, awesome. I love this. Let's talk about it, right? Like,
I know, I know. At first, I would have, like, I would have, like, heart palpitations, like, "Oh my gosh, somebody doesn't agree with me." And now I'm like, "You're just not my people." Like, "You're just not my people. You can
yeah,
keep working really hard, but I'm not."
yeah. Well, and it's funny because, like, that's also what's so great, right? Is that we can be so different and still be doing great things in the
Yeah,
world. So, I think
exactly.
it's so cool.
Just differently.
Mhm. Beautiful. So, all of that culminated and led you to see that, like, the life I'm living right now is my focus is not able to be here at the bedside with my husband. It's I need to make sure my notes are done and I need to make sure that my shifts are covered and I need to make sure that, da 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 da. And it's like, okay, wait, why is my mind over here? And to your point, right, giving that 100%, it's can you be present at work and can you be present at home? And can you be
Mhm.
present in your professional life? Like when you're at work, when you're all in, and then when you're at home, you're all in, right? So that's what I feel the 100% is.
Yeah,
But that's so hard to do when you have a loved one in the hospital. And it's like I can't even work. I can't be 100% at work because my mind's not here. So if I
right.
can be over here and be with my husband because that's where I'm needed right now, this is
Mhm.
going to be maybe 0%, right? And
Exactly.
how do we do that and how do we feel good about it, you know? So
Yeah,
how did that work for you when you kinda had that aha moment? What were the things that you started to implement? What were the strategies and things that you started to implement in your life to be able
yeah,
to step into that power and say, "I can't be
yeah.
at work, figure it out," right? Like
Yeah. Yeah. And at first, I think people will resonate with this, and I'm sure you experience this as well, is the guilt behind that decision.
yeah,
And I think that was something that I really struggled with because when we kind of step into our own and when we, are like, okay, well, I have to take care of myself in this moment, there's almost this idea of, well, I'm being selfish or I should feel guilty because this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Or, all of these feelings come up and you start to doubt yourself. And so I did feel like, okay, well, I do have to handle all of this. So there was a lot of like internal, conversations and conflict going on for me during that time. So it wasn't just this easy decision where I just, okay, I decided this and now it's going to happen. There was so much that went into my decision making around that, and it was so hard. It was so hard. But I think that with some time and sitting with that thinking and a little bit of, my own reflection, it was like, okay, I have to set some boundaries here. And that was probably the most important thing for me. When I'm with my husband, I'm not going to focus on work and vice versa. Like, you know, my husband is well taken care of right now. And so I'm going to get some work done. And, so I think that there was an idea of how do I try and find you know, I know some word people hate the word balance because it's like impossible to achieve. But for me, it's like I strive for that. It's something that like, is important for me to try to get to. And it doesn't have to be perfect every day, but it has to be something on my mind. And so the idea for me was how do I just find a little bit of balance while I'm also taking care of what's important to me, but also taking care of myself in the process, because I was not doing that. And so, after we kind of got through the immediate scare of everything that was going on, it was how do I best take care of me? I had been put to the back burner for so long. I was going through the motions every day. I was tired. I was burned out. I was anxious. I was probably depressed. How do I shift that focus back to me and how do I take care of myself? And I really kind of leaned into a community. Again, it was during COVID. And so all the gyms were shut down. And I leaned into like an online network of women who were supporting one another to continue to work out every day. We were reading personal development books. We were, chatting in the morning before our workouts. Like it was just this positive, uplifting community. And so the first thing that kind of changed for me was bringing in a new energy and bringing in people around me that lifted me up, supported me, were there for me, but also challenged me to like do things a little differently. And so reading some personal development books. I remember my first one because I am not a personal development book person, and they told me to read some Jen Schwytzer books. I don't know if you're
Yeah,
familiar with her.
yeah.
Like,
Love
"You Are a Badass," and I was like, "Oh," after reading that, like, I am a badass. Like, I was like, "Oh, this is amazing." So, like, I kind of, dove into that a little bit and, just taking care of myself physically, and I could feel, like, a mindset shift for myself. I could feel like, "Okay, I'm starting to take care of myself a little bit differently." I felt some confidence developing, my self-esteem, like, things were changing. It took a while, but I started to develop, like, just these healthy habits that are still kind of ingrained in me and got me through a really, really hard time, and it helped me shift that focus and that mindset to a new and different place for myself.
Amazing. So you changed the people that you had close proximity to you, which is huge,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, I think
yeah.
back to sort of that shift for me too. And I mean, there were many milestones, along the way, but I think that was such a huge aha moment is I'll share briefly because I think you can relate because you sort of did the same thing is we thought we had to change the environment, right? And so I went from like the role I was in, which I mean, these roles because we know each other in that setting, but just for those that kind of don't know, I'll give it. But like the role I was originally in, sort of working overnights in the emergency department, then providing some level of supervision to other folks, right? So moving into sort of a different role. And then over time, that just started to shift and like things around me shifted, right? And that felt different. And it didn't feel right anymore. Like there was something I felt like I was wrong, and I'm like, okay, instead of diving in that moment, I was like, okay, I just need to change my surroundings. Maybe I need a new role.
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't right for me anymore, and so then moved on to a completely different role. And even though I loved all of these roles individually as they were, like I felt like I served a purpose in those times, right? And then supervising in a different capacity in community work, which I thought I needed to get back to that because maybe I needed that little bit of like, and so I
Yeah.
started doing that level of work and loved it, but also like started to feel this like, gosh, and when I looked back, it hit me that I was like, okay, hi, I'm the problem, right? Like that was
Right.
sort of it. It was just like,
Me.
you can that, right? Like, hi. Like it was me. It was not the surroundings. And yes, it's important to recognize and to keep what you were pointing to, like the boundaries of like, okay, I was letting close proximity to me. There was people in my world that I was keeping for that like
Mhm.
misery loves company sort of thing, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think when we're
Yes.
in this field, it is high burnout. It's so hard. We are dealing with things that, I mean, death and dying and tragedy, and we are seeing the depths of the world, right? And
Yeah.
so we're carrying that weight, and we don't, if you're not familiar with how to take care of yourself through that and what you're speaking to of like
You
that,
will go down.
well, you will, yeah, that weight will just implode you.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting. I had to really not just change my surroundings, I had to change the people that I allowed close proximity to me. And
Yeah.
that felt like severing a limb, right?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
lost some good friends. I
Same.
lost some really good friends during this transition, because they just weren't used to boundaries. They weren't used to me saying no. They weren't used to a different kind of energy. I didn't want to be surrounded by people who were so negative and complained and didn't make changes. And I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, my ship is not going to go down with your ship. So, and it was hard. Like you said, it's like severing a limb. Like, that was a really hard time for me, but I think in the long run it's really been helpful for me because I'm not surrounded by that negativity and I'm not interested in doing it.
Yeah. And it's allowed you to up level into this new version
Yeah.
that can now support people that are in that version, right? Which is
Yeah.
just such a beautiful thing. And I see it in
Yeah.
you. I see it in how you show up in the world. I see it on how you show up in your social media. And I mean, people are reaching out to you to come speak to them, to come be a part of them and give them advice and support and guidance. So it's transparent that you've made that shift, which is,
Thank you. I appreciate it.
yeah. So the how, right? I think that's the thing, the how. So let's kind of dive in for a second of how did you put those boundaries in place? How did you say no? It's funny. I listened to a podcast and they say at every podcast they're like no is a full sentence. And I'm like,
Yes.
"Oh my gosh, it's so true." Right? But like how did
No.
you say no? How did you set those boundaries? Like what were
Yeah.
the things that you had to really the how,
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me was just being a little bit more organized and prepared. I think that that's really helped me because, like, on a Sunday, I take a look at my schedule for the week and I'm like, oh, wow, I scheduled like 3 things in the evening. That's going to like significantly deplete me, and I don't have the time for that. And so it just makes me see things a little bit differently. Like, what can I take off of my plate? And a saying that I heard a long, long time ago was if you say yes to someone else, what are you saying no to yourself for?
Mhm.
And I thought that was so powerful. And it's like just taking that ability to step back and be like, okay, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? And a lot of times it was me that was falling off of the radar. If I was going to dinner with my girlfriends 3 nights a week, I was probably not going to make my yoga class, or I wasn't going to get time with my family, or, I wasn't going to read the book that I wanted to read. And things are important to me. And so it's hard, and no is a complete sentence, and I have significant anxiety, so when I first started trying to set boundaries, I was like, "No, because blah, 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 and this and this and this," and I'm like, "I don't need to explain, I just need to say, 'Hey, no, I can't tonight.'" Or no, I don't have the capacity to take that on. And I feel like over time, it has just become a little bit easier. There are still moments that are going to like catch me when I'm like, no, and blah 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 blah. And it's just really it's hard. It's hard, but I think just like any habit, anything that you try and like implement in your life, it's something that gets easier over time, and it's something that, like, when you start prioritizing yourself and recognizing this is why I'm doing it and this is my why behind it, it becomes so much more authentic when you are setting those boundaries.
Yeah. So it's the practicing, it's making it a habit. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
And it's interesting because I think some of it is like we have to practice on ourselves first, right? Like if we're going to tell ourselves, like, okay, you're going to work out 2 times a week for the next month, right? Like, and then we break that promise to ourselves. Well, if we're breaking promises to ourselves, right? Like all
yeah,
bets are off at that point. So it's like
exactly.
really figuring out how to work that in on yourself and then implement it with other people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of set the stage of like, these are some of the ways that you've implemented this on yourself, now sort of just diving into for you, you have done community social work, hospital social work, outpatient social work. What else am I missing?
Insurance, social work.
Oh, yes, I forget about that one, right?
Yeah.
Care
It's a
management
forgettable
stuff.
experience.
Yeah, oh yeah. Always a lovely one. Yes, 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 like health homes, all of that stuff. So
Yep.
going from the knowledge base that you have and this, I think you and I are sort of on the same track, like 15-ish years of being in
Mhm.
this field, right? Like you've sort of had this new discovery, and you and I are sort of in the same realm where we are as a social worker, it's so regulated. And
Yeah.
so like this is the box you're in, and these are the things that you
Yeah.
can do in that
Yeah.
box, right? There are many boxes that you can choose from, right? There's
Yeah.
the
But
things
you're
are
still
listed,
gotta stay in your little box.
but you gotta stay in your little box. And then we're like, me being a little bit of a wild child, and I think you and I are similar in that way a little bit, that we're like, I don't feel good. Like I'm not a box. Like I need to kind of, like
Yeah.
there's something I need to
Yeah.
I need to break through this. And so you've shifted over here into this coaching space that I refer to as the wild, wild west compared to what we have lived in here.
Yeah.
And you're like, dang, this is like freeing, but also it's terrifying because we're so used to the box, right? So, how
Yeah.
have you made that shift? Share a little bit about your coaching and sort of how you're helping women, and men, but primarily your niche is like working with women.
Yeah.
Um, how are you doing that? How have you moved into that space? And what does that look like for you?
It was it's hard. It's hard to go from the brain of living in a box to
Mhm.
stepping out of that box, and for me, it's more about being myself, and we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, is that when you are working in that box, you very much have to follow the rules and regulations of what you're doing. And right now in the coaching area, I can just be myself. And sometimes I'll say to my clients and a lot of my, I'll tell people like what you see is what you get. This is who I am. I'm going to be myself on these calls. If you can't, if you can't relate to me, like, I'm not gonna change as a result of that, unfortunately. Like, I can't do it. Like, I want to be me, and I want people who resonate with me to work with me, and that's something that's so important for me. But I think I reached out to you, like, maybe last year, and I said, you know, I'm having trouble going from my social work brain to my coaching brain, and, like, the idea of not bringing therapy into coaching and vice versa. And I I struggle with that a lot. Like that's still something that I'm like, okay, these are very two separate things and we operate them in two separate ways and I'm looking at two different client sets and it's just like with your social work brain, you're like, I want to help everybody and I can help everybody. But when you're coaching, you're like, no, I can only like these are the people that I'm working with. And it's just like it is the wild, wild west. And social workers, I do think that they are starting to understand coaching a little differently, but there is a huge stigma on coaching in the mental health space. You're an unregulated practice. Nobody's overseeing you. Like, are you providing therapy? And so I think part of that is like breaking the stigma on coaching versus therapy and the difference is there because I think that that is so important for us as coaches, for social workers, for clients to like know and understand.
Yeah. No, I think that it's been an amazing experience and journey. And I think the difference that I've seen from the get-go, right, is that in working with my own coach, right, this has opened my eyes that we have people that maybe just don't even go to college, right? Which is fine. Like there are people that make great money and do amazing, impactful things in this world that have a high school degree or not even, right? And they just have such passion and purpose and they've stepped into it. And then, I think I look at that and I'm like, that's beautiful. However, if they're going to come into this coaching space and have zero training in any sort of traumatic things
Mhm.
or social work, therapeutic
Mhm.
intervention, right? They could be doing clients a disservice. And so just
Yes.
knowing that, right? And so what we see here is somebody who has had maybe some crazy life experience from a very young age that makes a remarkable coach and they go out and they change the world, right? And then there's people that think, "Oh, I can do that too," without that experience, and they're charging a
Yep.
bajillion dollars and they're providing not the thing that they should be. They're trying to provide a
Right.
therapeutic intervention to somebody, and I think that's the difference as being in both worlds to be able to
Yes.
recognize that we as social workers actually make the most beautiful, wonderful coaches because we can recognize this person right now is not stable, therefore they're not going to be able to scale. They need therapy, right? Whereas we can
Yeah.
be that
Yep.
and we can say to them, listen, I can't be your therapist, but as your coach, this is what I'm going to recommend you go do. And we can survive, we can
Yeah.
support them in that therapeutic way and recognize
Yep.
that, but not all coaches are able to do that. So when my coach was like, Erin, you don't need to go get more credentials and more certificates and more, she's like, you have the knowledge and background and expertise to be a coach. And even more so than a lot of coaches out there because we have that experience.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it so great. We can kind of break through that box, we can break through that barrier and
Yeah.
share like it's okay
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
this.
And I do love when clients come to me and they'll say, I don't know if I need a therapist and or a coach. And I'll say, well, let's talk about that. And as you said, like we have the ability to like process that with them and talk about like what would be best and what are the differences like. And if somebody comes to me as a coach for a coach and I say, I think you need a therapist first, I'm going to refer them to one of the best therapists I know. Like I have a great community of therapist friends and so that level of trust, I hope that they come back to me when when they've worked through like some of that trauma or, acute event that they might have going on and say, I did my work. I feel really good with where I'm at. And now I'm ready for a coach. And I'm like, yes, let's do it. Um, because I think that that is something we can offer that others can't.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think it's hard for us to break into this area because we're so programmed to be boxed
Yeah.
in, and so
Yep.
that is something I've really had to shift with, but it's been,
Mm.
like I said, such a beautiful, beautiful journey, and I can see that within you, I can see that shift within you too, and just how you're putting yourself out there and saying like, "This is me, this is where I'm at, this is my passion, this is my purpose," and it's been so fun to watch, us go from like itty bitty
Mhm.
little social workers running around a hospital to like the world is here for us to serve in whichever way that we can navigate.
Exactly, exactly. I love it.
So what is the next step for you, Jen? What do you think? Like right now, um, you are doing a little bit of therapy work, but you're really building this coaching side. You're doing a lot of consulting work. So folks that we were talking about before, folks that want you to come in either as sort of a consult in a larger group to provide that strategies on burnout and navigating life and work-life balance and that stuff. But also, like, if somebody wanted to work with you, what are the different capacities coaching-wise that you are providing for?
Yeah, so right now I offer the consultation services. So I'll go into companies or organizations and help to kind of create a more positive, efficient culture for staff. So setting boundaries, working with difficult clients, having difficult conversations,
Mm,
utilizing your support how you need to, work life balance, all that fun stuff. So I do that, but also there's my component of one-on-one work. So I love productivity. It's one of my favorite things to do. So I do offer monthly accountability coaching, which is just for people who have big goals that just need a little bit of extra help to stay on task, focused, and kind of bring in some healthy habits to make sure that they reach that goal. And then I also offer 3-month programs for women who are just looking to lay the foundation to make big transformation in their life and career.
amazing. I love it. So if there are folks that are in my world that are listening to this that are like, wow, Jen is just amazing, which she is, has exactly what I need, how can we find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at kindfulnesscoaching.com, or you can find me on Instagram at kindfulnesscoaching.
Okay, so you live pretty much on the Insta. That's probably the best way.
I mean, it's yeah, it's I'm still getting used to Instagram. I grew up in the Facebook
I know.
generation, so
I know. I know. I hover between both, and then, a couple of my friends recently are like, "You're never on LinkedIn. We wanna see your stuff on LinkedIn," and I'm like, "Ugh." So I'm, like, jumping over there, dipping my toe, and it's funny because I've
Yep,
had a lot of people reach out just by, like, just by being in there, that I haven't
yeah,
talked to in years, and they're like, "Oh my god, where have you been?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is
yeah,
so interesting." It's just a
yeah,
different platform, um, a different way of just connecting with professional
yep,
people, just or
yep,
reconnecting, which is fun. So, yeah, but
absolutely.
I love Instagram. I think it's that one has been something I've been playing with for, like, the last year, and I feel like it's
Yep,
a nice way to connect with people that are all over the place. It's fun.
agreed,
Yeah.
agreed.
So
Yeah,
I will make sure that in the show notes too, I put how to connect with you, your website, and your connections there too. So if you want to work with Jen in any sort of capacity or just follow her just to be in her space and energy, please do that. And the last thing I think we'll kind of start to wrap it up. Is there anything else you wanted to share though about your business or that we didn't tackle? I feel like we went through a lot of stuff.
yeah, I mean, I yeah, we did go through a lot, and so I think the only thing I would remind people of is to be kind to yourself and give yourself grace and, take care of you.
Yeah. That was going to be my question of like if there was anything you wanted to leave with the world. It's to be kind to yourself. I love it. And that's what your business is all about. So it's just perfect, wrapped up in a little bow. Excellent.
Thank you.
Perfect. This has been fun. I am so grateful that we've connected and reconnected and reconnected. I feel like we kind of like cycle through. We're like, talk to her in a while. Like jump back into a conversation. But this is not the last that you've heard from Jen on my platform or just in the world. And so we will leave it with be kind to yourself and please reach out to her if there's any questions or you want to be in her space. So thank you for being here, Jen, today. And we'll wrap up. Uh-oh, did I lose you right at the end? Well, I'm going to end the recording there, guys. Bye.